merge it up there.
Okay.
Hi, welcome to Sweating with the Oldies. It's hot in here, so the air conditioner is not quite cooled the room out, so I'm like dying here. So I'm Ruth, this is Robin, and this is Oreo, and we are here this week with the topic, shouldn't we silence evil and wrong? And before we dive into that, though, we want to talk a little bit about our connection. Now it turned all yellow. Fun.
Yes.
So
we have no idea what the problem is now.
yeah, the
Spectrum came out this week and fixed the problems as they saw them outside, and there were connection issues, but the output. So don't know.
Yep. So we're not sure. So we're gonna keep
Plugging
along.
away.
Although the wind is kicking up more, so that's probably our biggest problem is the wind.
Regardless.
Yeah, and there's not much we can do about it. So.
Well, actually, they suggested that, and it wouldn't cost anything. They said to put a conduit down instead of having it coming from the.
Okay.
So we should probably set that up.
I don't know who you keep calling we, but sure, go ahead. So anyway, couple of things before we get started. If a show idea at any time, and at the end of the 10 minutes, we'll stop the discussion and bring in anything that the viewers bring up. Also, we'd like to tell you about 2 books that Robin has recently released. One is we're gonna disappear from the screen here in a second. Afraid of the Dark. What does the small word say?
What suffering tells us about God.
Thank you. It was hard to read from here. So, Afraid of the Dark, What Suffering Tells Us About God. So, if you've had...
Up through the time that the United States came to exist as an independent nation. And it's not really a complicated idea. Essentially, it comes down to this. There is speech that's going to be offensive. There are things that will be printed that you will find offensive. So what? If you find them offensive, then go elsewhere, or the way you respond to speech that you don't like is with more speech. That is, the idea is that arguments and discussion and the freedom to discuss and an openness is going to solve any problems that we have with bad speech. The problem comes when there's an attempt made to control it. And once you start controlling it, then you open it up for whoever ends up with the most power being able to shut down everybody else. And then you end up with no free speech whatsoever. And so having free speech means that your society remains open. It means everybody can argue and discuss things freely without fear of repercussions, beyond being called an idiot and being shown why you're an idiot and having your hat handed to you, as it were, or your head handed to you. That is, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from criticism. That is, the whole point is that there will be criticism and lots of it. And you as a speaker or publisher or somebody doing videos on YouTube or whatever need to develop a thick skin to be able to handle the fact that there will be people that disagree with you. Some of the people that disagree with you will be trolls. Some of them will be insane. Some of them will be just stupid as rocks. You should be able to handle that. That is reasoned argument, which is increasingly rare in our age of reason society at the moment. But people should be able to say any abominable thing that they want. And it's not up to anybody else to make them stop. They can say whatever they want, and if what they're saying is abominable and stupid, then eventually they'll be standing over on a street corner yelling at clouds, and nobody will pay any attention to them. Years ago, when I was at UCLA, you have Brew and Walk, and you'd have people setting up little tables, or you'd have people standing in the parks giving speeches. And you know what happens? Most people just keep walking by and ignore it all, because who cares, usually? occasionally somebody would, you'd see 2 or 3 people standing around the Marxist over there spouting his idiocy, or you'd have somebody over here, preaching the gospel. And again, you'd only have 2 or 3 people standing around because mostly we don't care. But nobody made them stop. Nobody got mad. Nobody did anything except mostly ignore them. Occasionally they'd get hecklers. Remember those? That's the way it works. That's the way it's supposed to work. That is, you have comment things on YouTube videos. People can make comments. The people can email you. People can tell their friends to hate you, whatever. But you should be free to spout whatever lunacy that you feel like spouting. And then you suffer the negative repercussions from that as people tell you, oh, you're a stupid moron. And then you tell them, no, you're a stupid moron. And it devolves into name calling, which is not really helpful. But again, that's the essence of freedom.
Well, the people that just do name calling pretty much are trolls.
Yes, they are.
Whether they're robot trolls or they're actual human trolls, unless they have a reasoned argument, those other people you can just ignore. So if you're one of the people that just goes, well, that's a stupid thing, or something like that, you're not helping the conversation, so you might as well not say anything. But if you have an opposing argument or a supporting statement supporting the person's point, those are useful things to add to the conversation.
Right. What was the one thing you were talking about, example of what social media is like earlier today at breakfast?
Oh.
That was funny.
Yeah.
This is the way arguments tend to end up going.
Yeah, it was on my nephew's Facebook page.
Ray Bradbury wrote a book, Fahrenheit 451, which deals with the issue of censorship. And he tells the story that he started getting letters from some students in the 1960s or 70s pointing out that, his book, Fahrenheit 451, which is against censorship, had been censored by the publisher. All the damns and other cussing had been taken out of it. And so, of course, he made a hairy fit with the publisher, and they fixed it. But as he pointed out in a postscript to the thing, that, see, this is how he puts it. There is more than one way to burn a book, and the world is full of people running about with lit matches. Every minority, be it Baptist, Unitarian, Irish, Italian, octogenarian, Zen Buddhist, Zionist, Seventh-day Adventist, Women's Lib, Republican, Manichaean, Foursquare Gospel, feels it has the will, the right, the duty to douse the kerosene, to light the fuse. Every dimwit editor who sees himself as the source of all dreary blancmange, plain porridge, unleavened literature licks his guillotine and eyes the neck of any author who dares to speak above a whisper or write above a nursery rhyme. And the problem is, and he points this out both in Fahrenheit 451 as well as in this particular postscript, that censorship comes from all places. That is, people say, well, Amazon is choosing, they're a private company, they're choosing not to sell these things, or this or that company is choosing not to sell these things, or this publisher has decided to withdraw these titles. It's still censorship. And I would argue that even if it's not illegal and even if it's not technically violating the First Amendment, it's still a bad idea. That is, that's not the way it's supposed to work. That is, people get upset at a given work of literature or a given article or a given person who wrote something, and so the publisher sacks that individual, sacks the author, essentially burns all the copies of the book. This is not the way it's supposed to work. That's not the idea. If you don't like what somebody has written, then don't read it or write a response to it. There are many crackpot works out there, and most of the time, most people, and certainly the experts in the field, will ignore the crackpots, not because the crackpots can't be answered, a lot of times because the experts look at it and it's so ludicrous, it's like, well, anybody that has 2 brain cells should be able to tell this is stupid. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have 2 brain cells, or they are not experts in that particular field, and so they have no way of knowing. But from an expert standpoint, looking at a work by a crackpot, it is not an easy thing to respond to, because you essentially, if it's a crackpot book, you're going to have to write a book to respond to it, and the crackpot book will have sold far better than your response to it ever will be. That is, what's his name? The guy that wrote about alien astronauts coming down to create a lot of historical relics. Von Daniken. Anyway, his books are bestsellers. The responses to his lunacy, that's a good word, did not sell nearly as well. People remember him, sort of. They don't remember any of the responses to it, and so that's the downside.
Well, the anti-vax doctor is a really good example.
That's another good example.
His medical license has been revoked. His findings that vaccinations cause autism have been widely discredited, but still people will not get their kids vaccinated because they're afraid it causes autism. Like, what if?
Yes.
And that's a part of the problem, because people would prefer to believe a lie, which the Bible says.
Yeah.
Okay, so how social media works. I prefer mangoes to oranges. Random person. So basically what you're saying is you hate oranges. You also failed to mention pineapples, bananas, and grapefruits. Educate yourself. I'm literally shaking.
But that's what you will run across, how people react to it.
Yep.
And you see
Steve has joined us.
You see numerous crackpot theories that are out there. And while as an expert or as a reasonable person you would prefer that such crackpots would go away, you cannot silence them, and you don't really want to silence them, because silencing people creates a far bigger problem than letting the nutcases continue to spout nonsense. That is, evil people, stupid people need to have the freedom that people that are not stupid or nutcases have. Otherwise, the people who are not stupid or nutcases are also going to end up being silenced eventually, because there's always constituencies, as Ray Bradbury talks about, that are ready to shut down people that disagree or say something that's out of line with what their narrow point of view happens to be. And the answer to speech that you don't like, to bad speech, is more speech, reactions to it, not shutting people down. People need to be allowed to say bad things, to film bad things, to print bad things. That's the nature of freedom. If you don't believe in freedom, then that's a different issue altogether. But if you think freedom and freedom of speech for you is okay and a good thing, and if you wouldn't like to be censored, then don't censor anybody else. I think there's a verse in the Bible about doing to others as you'd have them do to you. Freedom of speech falls into that category.
Told you it would come up.
Yeah, it did. But, I have experienced censorship not from governments, but from private entities. And let me tell you, it does not feel good, and it just makes the author angry. And so if you don't like the feelings that you would have if somebody made you shut up, that gives you enough information to know that making people shut up is probably not a good idea. I'm not sure why this is so hard. And the modern movement towards censorship is very uneven, let's say, and is the nature of censorship. That is, it picks and chooses. It will censor the evil that a particular group is particularly outraged by. And so you will find certain books, say, that deal with issues of transgenderism or homosexuality that you'll have groups that want to ban, and have on occasion successfully gotten, say, Amazon to ban. And yet Amazon continues to sell Mein Kampf, as they should be able to, but they should be able to sell the other nonsense as well. So this is the problem with censorship. It is just not and it's not a good solution to the problem that the censors are looking to solve either. This is the other weird thing. When Dr. Seuss's publishing company decided to remove certain books from sale, what happened to those books? Their value and the sales skyrocketed. That's what will happen. If you censor something, people are going to wonder, well, why was it censored? Let me go find it. Let me read it.
The thing I did on Dr. Seuss's birthday was I found a read aloud of, and so I saw it on Mulberry Street on
Which
YouTube.
is one of the books that they stopped publishing.
That hadn't been taken down yet. And I read it to the kids, and then we talked about censorship.
Right.
We talked about the things that were in there that people found offensive that needed to be removed. And we talked about, caricature, and we talked about how people used to believe things, and the importance of showing someone in traditional costume, even though it doesn't. Like if you say there's a Raja and a Chinese man and they all look the same, they all look like Charlie Brown, it's not, you don't see the characters there. So anyway, we had a discussion about that. So it was a great time to talk to my kids about censorship. And I told my students, I said, because you're under 18, your parents have the right to censor what you read based on your ability level, things that they're comfortable with you knowing at this age and things like that. But really nobody else has that right. Not the librarian, not me, no one, just your parents. That's between you and your parents what you're allowed to read. So
yeah, nobody should be deciding for you what you can and cannot read, what you can and cannot write. Now you're never guaranteed publication. That is, a newspaper may choose not to publish the letter that you write to the editor. A book publisher may choose not to publish what you've written as a book.
But that's usually driven more by money than it is by
Anything
your
else.
speech. So if they don't think the book will sell, so I was thinking about this, like back when bookstores didn't have an online presence, when they were just standalone bookstores, you would find books that that may or may not be controversial, but they're the books that will sell. So companies like Amazon, and now with the other Barnes and Noble, are they still in business? Okay,
And
Barnes and Noble
independent
having an
bookstores.
online presence, they don't have to take up space on their shelf with a particular book. So there's really no reason for the online booksellers to not have a book available, because especially the ones that are print on demand kind of books, it's not taking up any space anywhere on a shelf any place, and if someone wants it, then they can sell it to them. So things have changed a little bit now because of online booksellers, but they shouldn't be banning books because
Of their content.
because of their content. That's not their job.
their job. That is what will happen. Okay, for instance, many years ago, the Ayatollah Khomeini put a fatwa, a death threat, or a bounty on the head of an author. And I bought a copy of that author's book upon which the fatwa was issued only because of that. Otherwise, I'd never heard of the author before. I read the book, didn't find it all that interesting. But because somebody tried to censor it and put a bounty on the head of the author, suddenly a lot of people wanted to read that book or at least buy it. And that book became a bestseller. Author made a lot of money. It's good for him. And he didn't live in Iran, and so he was relatively safe. British government gave him some protection just in case. Again, censorship does not work. Years ago, when I was younger, I taught at a certain institution down below, and the presidency of the institution changed, and with that change, there was a name change, and the institution's, how shall I put it, outlook on things changed radically. And so I became involved in criticizing the institution and got involved in putting out an underground newspaper. As much as the administration of that institution tried to clamp down on the newspaper and get rid of the copies of the newspaper, it made it spread all the more.
And this was before the internet, so
Yes.
students had to make copies of
Which
the
they
newspaper
did.
to pass out. Yep.
Yeah, they made Xerox copies of our Xeroxed newspaper, and it spread everywhere so that everybody had read it, everybody had heard about it, everybody was talking about it. That's what censorship does. It's counterproductive. So just from a practical standpoint, if you're thinking that you want to censor somebody, it's not going to work out well for you, particularly if you're not a government. But even if you're a government, it doesn't work that well. The Soviet Union tried desperately to keep Russians from being able to read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's books. They were banned in the Soviet Union. They were published in the West. But copies of his books still circulated surreptitiously. There was a form of publishing in the Soviet Union called samizdat, which essentially was using, well, it was hard to get Xerox machines because, again, the Soviet Union was trying to control what people could and could not read. And since Xerox machines made it easy to make copies and print things, they tried to control that. Still, it got out. And that's just the way it works. The Chinese government attempts to keep Chinese citizens from being able to access certain websites and certain parts of the internet. It's not completely successful because people find ways of bypassing all the blocks that they put, because programmers are very creative people and they can find ways around just about anything. Yeah. So from a practical standpoint, censorship isn't a good idea, but what censorship does do is it can cause people to censor themselves, to second guess, decide, is it worth it to me to do this, or should I just shut up and keep my head down and hope that nobody shoots me or cancels me or whatever. People worry about losing their jobs now sometimes because of their political or religious beliefs, even in Western countries, which is very sad. It shouldn't be the case that you have to censor yourself in order to keep your job, but it does happen. We know we're related to people that it's happened to. Let's put it that way. Don't want to go into details to create more problems.
Well, if you look at people like Kirstie Alley, who came out as a Trump supporter, and she, like, tons of ridicule. She can't get projects now, and there are actors who are conservative, but because of the extremeness of the liberal culture of the TV and movie industry, they're afraid to say anything because they want work. That's how they feed their families.
So they keep their mouths shut.
And so they keep their mouths shut.
Going
That's
back
right.
again to that institution that I taught at, the institution got rid of all the classes I was teaching, Old Testament, because that institution didn't care about the Old Testament. And I had other faculty members who were seeing the same things going on at the institution that I was seeing. They would come up to me and say, we hate what they're doing to the Bible department. We think it's horrible what's going on, but I'm 2 years from retirement. So they did not feel the freedom to make any waves, because what happened there is if you made too many waves, they got rid of you.
Right.
And they did it over and over and over again, and it's a continuing problem. It's been going on there for the last 32 years, 33 years.
Yeah. Well, and then today on one of my teacher pages, a teacher was asking about mask mandates. Her state is not mandating masks, but there was something like weird about like the county or the district or something. So she was trying to decide, like some teachers were deciding that they weren't going to wear masks in the classroom, some were deciding that they were, and she wanted input from other teachers from around the country. And I just told her, I said, if you're a new or unprotected teacher, like if you don't have a union or you don't have tenure, don't risk it. It's not worth it. You've worked too hard, you've spent too much money and too much energy to get to this point. Unless you can afford to lose this job, I wouldn't fight it. I would just wear your mask. And see, now I'm at a place in my district, if I was in that situation with the current protections that I have with tenure, with my union and all that, I wouldn't wear one. If it was an option for me, I wouldn't wear one. Unless I had some real reason, like there was a kid in my class who, was compromised or something. But most of those kids are going to stay virtual this year if their parents are unsure about them getting infected. My only thing, I'll just make this really quick, my only thing about wearing masks around the kids, I don't like wearing masks, and I try not to anytime I can get away with it. But the children can't get vaccines, so I'm more conscientious of that around children, like when we have to be cooped up in a room together, 30 of us, plus me and other adults. There's going to be a lot of people in my room, and so until the kids can get the vaccine and they've had the opportunity to, then I feel it's important that teachers wear masks around the students. Even though they're, the infection rate is low, their risk is pretty low. You can argue that point many different ways, but still, I think it's really important that we be mindful of people who don't yet have the vaccine available to them. So as far as adults go, they've all had the opportunity. If they've chosen not to, then they choose the consequences. Just like if I choose not to wear a mask, I choose the consequences. And it's kind of the same thing really with censorship as well, the mask thing. It's like, do I have the freedom as an American to walk around without a mask on, or don't I? And so the two kind of dovetail together, I think. But anyway.
From a Christian standpoint, see, people look at this and say, well, Christians, you're supposed to be good. You shouldn't say or do bad things. And you see that a lot among Christians, and a lot of censorship historically has come from Christians or other religious groups. But I think that's a misreading of the biblical consequence. What was I talking about? Got distracted by the... Oh, well, that's okay.
I was watching the live stream dying and coming back to life again.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the issue is.
Yeah.
It's weird. Because, yeah.
Well, if Steve remembers what you're talking about, he can tell us and we'll go back to it.
Yeah, assuming that he got what we're talking about, or, live video interrupted.
I know, it keeps pausing.
So the problem is that you do have a lot of religious people. I remember.
Oh, you should be good, yeah.
And the idea that you need to be good, and you need to be righteous, and you need to do the right thing, and so shouldn't we rail against evil and make the evil people shut up and force them to recant and all of this. And the problem with that attitude is it's a bit of a misreading of what you actually see biblically, I would argue. And the reason I would argue that way is because if you go back to the very beginning with the Garden of Eden incident, God created Adam and Eve, put them in a perfect garden, and put a tree there which is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he told them, don't eat from it. And the intriguing thing in all of that is that he set them up and told them not to do something, but he gave them the option of choosing wrong. As if he was more concerned that people would be good than anything else, he would not have given them that choice. He wouldn't have made that a possibility. he would have walled everything off and made sure that they could not possibly have made the bad choices. And that's not what he did. In fact, he even gave them the opportunity by putting that tree there to begin with, so that they would be forced, in a way, to have to make choices. And so what I would argue there is that human freedom is of greater importance to God than human beings behaving well. That is, all of human history, all the horrors that we have gone through from God's perspective are worth it for freedom's sake. And so freedom is incredibly, speech and print should be pretty much unrestricted. I'm almost an absolutist in that regard.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
So,
I was hoping for that.
Okay. So,
because there are some things that you would have to go a different direction with.
okay. So I'm going to make a Facebook post saying that the president should be assassinated. I think that's what it was called. Anyway, so these girls had been on Lively, and they were bullying this other girl who was also on Lively. So I looked up the terms of service for, there's a really good website that has all that information, really easy to find. And I looked to see what the terms of service were, and you weren't allowed to be on Lively unless you were 13. Well, none of the children in our school, because we only go up to 5th grade, are 13. So because it was happening off campus, I only got involved because it was causing issues on campus. They weren't bullying her or doing any harm to her at school, but she came and talked to me about it because these girls were at school and they had been bullying her just online. It was strictly online bullying. So what I did then, because the law was at the time, I don't know if it's still that way, but the law was at the time, if it was happening off school property, we don't have any jurisdiction. Just like, if something happens on the freeway, that's the CHP's job, not the sheriff's job. And so you have certain jurisdictions. So anyway, but what I did is I called each of the parents and I said, look, I can't do anything about this because it's happening online. It's not happening at school. They're not doing it while they're at school. Because I talked to all 3 girls. They were all doing this from home. And I said, they're on this app, Lively, and you may not be aware that they're too young to be on the app, but your daughter is bullying another child on this app. And I have witnesses, yada, yada. And even the bullied child, I said, your child is being cyberbullied on this app, and she's not even old enough to be on there. Lo and behold, none of them were on the app after that. And the bullying situation went away and everybody were happy campers.
Yes.
So there are ways to deal with freedom of speech that doesn't involve censorship.
Right.
And that's...
And the other thing about, for instance, another place where censorship comes up is are with things like pornography. And things like child pornography are illegal and should be illegal because children are being harmed by the production of such things.
And they're not old enough to consent.
Right. Unconsenting adults, whatever. But when it's, when you're doing it with children, when you're doing it with animals, these children and animals cannot consent. Mm-hmm. And so that's a bad thing. And so that's the reason for outright bans on that kind of pornography, because it causes harm to people. And and harm needs to be, it's not just, oh, you hurt my feelings, right, kind of
I'm
harm.
Literally shaking.
Yeah, that's not...
It's trauma.
Yes. Thomas Jefferson made the comment once, if it doesn't break my bones or steal my wallet from my pocket, then I really don't care what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the guidelines for this sort of thing. Just because it makes you mad that I said something, or just because, I hurt your feelings or whatever. People get I did a blog post not that long ago on misgendering, using the wrong pronouns that people would choose to be given. I have spent my whole life being misgendered. When I was 4 years old, we went to a Christmas party on base, and my parents had put my name in so that I'd get one of the gifts at the Christmas party, and I got it all. Because my first name is Robin, and 87% of the people in the United States with that name happen to be female. And so my whole life I have experienced this sort of misgendering. I get things addressed to me Miss or Ms. I would get tampon samples in the mail. Once I got married, at least I had somebody that I could give them to. And
he doesn't get them anymore.
I don't get them anymore, though, but I used to get tampon samples in the mail. First day in a new school for high school, teacher's reading through the list of students, and he comes to my name and says, Miss Nettlehurst. I reacted by saying, that's Mr. This is life. Mm-hmm. Who cares? I have not been traumatized by it. I am not a ruined shell of a human being as a consequence of these experiences over my life. I have risen above them. I find them amusing and a fun story to tell people. But who cares? But yet, in some jurisdictions and some of the attitudes you see portrayed, it's as if this is the war. You might as well have shot the person in the head as to have used the wrong pronoun that they wanted. Get over yourself. Just make the correction. Tell the person, no, I would prefer to be, go by this name or this pronoun or whatever. Just be polite with people. You don't have to make it a federal case. It's not that complicated. It's not that hard.
And if somebody asks you to call them by a different pronoun, then you just do it because of the one verse.
Yes. Do to others as you'd have them do to you. I would like to be called Mr. I would like people to know that I am a cisgendered male.
Oh, really good example. A really good example was Caitlyn Jenner was being interviewed by, I don't know, somebody. And the person was uncomfortable calling her him from the time when she was Bruce Jenner. It gets very confusing.
Yes, it does.
They're talking about Bruce Jenner's Olympic career and kept using the feminine pronouns with Bruce Jenner. And so Caitlyn stopped the interview and she said, Bruce Jenner won those medals. Bruce Jenner ran those races. That was Bruce Jenner's life. When you talk about Bruce Jenner, you use he and him. But I am no longer Bruce Jenner. I'm Caitlyn Jenner. So you can use the pronouns she and her. And I am not offended if you mix it up. So anyway, it was quite interesting.
It's like with women that they get a different name when they get married. Mm-hmm. They used to, before they were married, they went by this name. Now they're married, they go by this name. People will get confused. Mm-hmm. Or a woman gets divorced and goes back to a different name. Again, people will get confused. Or people decide that they don't like their given name, and so they go to the court and get their name changed to something else. There will be some confusion. So, that's the way it is for human beings. I mean, when Nissan went from being Datsun to Nissan, it was a hard transition for a lot of us. But if you're talking about a Datsun 240Z versus a Nissan 300ZX or whatever it's called now, yeah, you make that adjustment, but you don't refer to the Datsun 240Z as a Nissan 240Z because that's not the name it had then.
I remember this discussion when, in the heat of the women's lib movement with Ms. So there was Miss, Mrs., and Ms. Now, I will say that adding Ms. to the mix made things worse for kids as far as grammar goes.
Complicated.
Because they want to put a period at the end of Miss, because there's a period at the end of all the other ones, and then they don't hear the difference between Miss, Ms., and Mrs. And so I like my title to be Mrs., but they call me Miss Nettlehurst because it's just the way third graders talk. So I don't get all bent out of shape about it. But I
You
remember
don't give them detention and
I do.
write
I
nasty-
take away all the recess and they have to write 100 times. My teacher goes by Mrs. So, but when I write anywhere that my name is displayed in the room, and I do have my name up above the door, and I tell the kids, if you're writing my name, copy it from above the door because that's the correct spelling. It's got all the correct punctuation and the correct capital letters. So that's my expectation. So if they write about me, I will correct them if they use Miss, period. They generally don't use Ms. unless they're copying it down. But anyway, I remember in the heat of the women's liberation
You
movement.
just get your doctorate and then you just be Dr.
There we go. Because I have
Solves
money
all
for
the
that.
problems,
Yeah,
yeah.
that doesn't solve the money problems though. Anyway, let me finish my story. But I remember my dad being really incensed by it. And so I asked him, because I was still kind of young.
People don't like change.
Yes. And I asked him, I said, well, what's the difference between Miss, Mrs., and Ms.? And he said, well, Miss is a woman who is not married. Mrs. is a woman who is married. And Ms. is a woman who isn't sure if she's a woman or not.
That's not the case.
I know. Generally, it's for professional women.
Right.
Or divorced women will use it. But
And the whole idea of it was that with men, you just have one term, Mr. You don't. It doesn't tell you whether or not that person is married or not. And so the idea was that women should have that as well,
right. But
which seems reasonable.
young boys used to be master. So you would, if you were addressing a letter to a young boy, you would say, Master so-and-so. I would have a really hard time with writing master whoever to a boy in my class. Sorry, you are not my master.
Yeah, and what if his last name was Bates?
Yeah, you just want to show up my puns from last night.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, if you're arguing with somebody about whether to wear masks or not, it makes you a mask debater. And people who let's see, the people who are arguing are mask debating. So there you go. See, who's trying to one up my pun? My pun was better.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
But I thought it just popped in my
Since
head.
you had
and let it
mentioned
out.
porn, of
Yes.
course. But now I tell children the difference between the titles, and I say that Miss is an unmarried woman, Mrs. is a married woman, and Ms. can signify a professional woman, a woman who is divorced, or just a woman who doesn't want to use Miss or Mrs. And so, but then I tell them you have to use Mrs. when you talk about me. So.
Yeah.
But I don't give them a smackdown for saying Miss, because that's just how third graders talk.
Yes.
So,
So a lot of these things, it's just a matter of being polite and being consistent with doing to others you'd have them do to you. It is, use whatever title or pronoun or whatever it is that an individual wants, because that's what you want.
now what does annoy me is when at school, when they give us things like lanyards or name placards or whatever, they'll default to one title like Ms. for all the females. And I don't like that, because I do like Mrs. in front of my name.
It's just from a practical standpoint.
I know.
They got
but
300 people. They got to print these things out.
It's not 300. It's 25.
Well, it's still a lot of work.
No,
to have
you
to do
can
it.
fix it for those
Yeah,
of
you
us who
could.
want to go by something else.
It's just laziness.
Yeah, well,
That's all it is. They're not trying to be rude. They're just trying to be
yeah,
lazy.
they are. Try to be rude to me.
Yeah,
Just me.
generally speaking, this is the issue I have with a lot of people getting mad about so many different things they get mad at. I've quoted it before. It's from Napoleon Bonaparte. He had a general come to him, or his aides come to him and tell him that, there's this general that's doing bad things. He's obviously working for the enemy. And Napoleon wouldn't have any of it, and he told them, look, do not attribute to malice what's more easily explainable by stupidity and incompetence. And generally that's the case. That is, when things go wrong, when people don't do their jobs well, It's not because they're trying to be mean to you. They're not trying to screw you over. They're just stupid. They're just incompetent. It has nothing to do with venality. It has everything to do with humans are not always
Venality?
being evil.
Venality?
I think that's how it's pronounced.
I've never heard that word before.
Oh. Anyway, don't be bad.
That's 2 words.
I have a vocabulary.
Apparently. I thought I did too.
Sorry.
Well, see, and I'm really big on accuracy with stuff too. Like, I will ask someone, what title do you prefer? Because if I'm not sure, I will ask them.
That's a reasonable thing
Like
to do.
when,
But
if
not
I
everybody thinks of that.
have, if I have a guest speaker in my classroom or a student teacher or whatever, I ask them, what do you prefer to be called? And he is like sacked out. Oh, now he's awake. But
you moved him.
yeah, he just was hanging there. He was getting really heavy on my arm. But anyway,
Do you ever ask him what pronoun he wants?
he's just a he. Even though he's had some of his he removed, he's still a he. So although sometimes he pees like a her, but he's still a he.
Okay.
So he transgender pees. he lifts and he squats.
He's
So-
transitioning.
Yes, he's transitioning. But he's going to be stuck in transition because we're not removing anything else. It's
Yeah.
expensive. So, but anyway, enough of that discussion.
Yes.
So,
And people with no sense of humor might cancel us for.
yes,
Oh dear.
for insisting on a gender for my dog.
Yes. That's the other sad thing. And see, that's the other sad thing with attempts at censorship and canceling and controlling things is that it negatively impacts creativity, it negatively impacts humor, because you say something, then people get mad at you. And you get weird things like changing the names of sports teams or getting rid of certain names of products. And I'm puzzled as to the motivation because the sports team is a positive thing. It's something we like. So how is it derogatory to have the name of whatever particular group?
Well, what it does is it whitewashes all of society, literally.
Yeah.
Like,
That is,
there
nobody-
are no black people on your products anymore. Uncle Ben is now just
Whatever it is.
Ben. And Aunt Jemima, her picture's not on there. They changed the
I
name
mean,
of
we
that
like
syrup
syrup,
altogether.
we like the rice. These are positive
I
things.
just like to
I'm
put
not
out
sure
there
why
that I'm a
it's
log cabin
bad.
girl, so they're not touching
Oh,
log
yes,
cabin.
we did.
But,
Yeah, we
So-
grew up with log cabin as well.
yeah.
So, but it's
But-
just,
well,
it puzzles
today-
me a bit. I mean, are we going to get rid of sports teams named after, in California after bears, the Bruins or whoever? Fighting Irish are going to have to change that. It's just, there's an inconsistency in the behavior anyway. So
Irish
I
do
don't know.
fight, though. When they've had enough to drink, they do fight.
That's
Just saying.
racial stereotype.
Hey, I'm Irish. Steve, you may not know this, but we're Irish. Scottish and Irish both. I've done our
dear.
DNA, so
Yeah.
I've done mine anyway. But we come from the same family, so
Yeah.
we our fathers were brothers, and so yeah, we're Scottish and Irish. So I can say that if I want.
So I could say that I'm a kraut, and it's not offensive. But-
Right, and when you're grumpy, you're a sauerkraut.
Oh dear. Yes. Oh well.
So if we haven't been canceled by now, we'll be back next week with what's our topic for next week?
Are there too many people?
Ooh, are they overpopulation?
Uh-huh.
Ah,
Yes.
okay.
Spoiler alert, there aren't.
Okay.
It's not a thing.
But in the 70s,
Oh,
that
that
was one of the big things.
I
I
know,
remember
we'll
reading
talk
it in
about
Weekly Reader that there were going to be too many people, there wouldn't be enough food, it was going to be bad, man. It was going to be bad.
Yeah.
Kind of like that joke. I read 1984. Boy, things were really bad back then. It's not a history book.
Yeah, so it's also not a how-to book. Fahrenheit 451 is not a how-to book either.
Exactly.
There's an awful lot of people, as Ray Bradbury said, running around with lit matches, however, which is very sad.
Yep, I had that on my email quote, like anytime my emails went out last year, because that was a thing. There was a teacher on one of my teacher Facebook pages that she burned in her own backyard her own copy of Christopher Columbus. And I spoke out loudly and proudly about the evils of book burning. And other people were like, it's okay, it's her own book. It's like, no, it's not okay.
Not okay. Any society that thinks that burning books is okay, sooner or later is going to start burning authors.
Yes. And then I posted that, and they're like, oh, she's not going to do that.
Yes, she is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It comes to that sooner or later.
Yep.
Once you've opened that door, that's where you're headed.
Yep. And nobody else has shown a burned book on the Facebook page. So now I have changed it to the quote from the I Have a Dream speech. I have a dream that my little children will one day be judged on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin or however it goes.
Right.
I have that now because now it's all about the color of your skin.
Which is weird.
Yes. And that we could have as...
We can have a discussion at some point.
Yes,
well, we
white
have
privilege
in the past
versus wealth privilege.
talked about it, but
yeah.
we can do it again.
We should just go, what is your privilege? And then we can talk about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for joining us. So we will be back next Saturday at 4 o'clock.
Lord willing.
Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, and it's not too windy, or
Although
maybe
it did stabilize, so I don't know.
Yeah. So
I should probably reboot the modem too.
Okay.
Because I haven't done that since they fixed it, supposedly.
Okay.
So that may be an issue.
But I would put in the order for them to come and give us something more stable.
Well, the guy that came out here on Thursday, he said that they can put the conduit in, won't cost us anything, and he gave me his name and number to get a hold of him. So
awesome.
Yep.
So
anyway,
maybe
we'll do that.
So we'll keep trying to improve our feed.
Yes.
Also, if you want to join us for church, we live stream our services at 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time on the Quartz Hill Community Church YouTube page, and also on the Quartz Hill Community Church Facebook page. And for those of you that are on my friends list, I share it. Sometimes not right away. It depends on how busy I am getting things going, because I'm back here running everything. So, but I do share it so that people can watch.
Yeah,
so.
we have quite a production set up here.
So anyway, we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.